Ner, 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 ner.
The
Ner,
5
ner,
o'clock
ner,
news
ner, 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 ner.
at
Ner,
7
ner, 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 ner,
on
ner.
Channel
Ner, ner, ner,
13.
ner, ner, ner. Dun dun.
Hello, and welcome to the Channel 13 News. I'm Matthew Matthews.
And I'm Cooper Cooperton. Tonight, we bring you breaking news straight from Berlin.
As we informed you several days ago, the Soviet Union has placed a blockade on West Berlin, effectively preventing any supplies from entering the war-torn city.
This is just where Channel 13's own Fernando Fitzgerald reports the action straight from the scene. Fitzy?
Yes, Cooper, I'm here in Berlin, where I've been staying for a few days to discover a little more about what has been happening here in the democratic portion of the German capital. 3 days ago, on June the 24th, the first official crisis of the emerging Cold War began when the Soviet Union put up a blockade which cut off all of the land and rail routes between East and West Berlin.
Fernando, what exactly does the Soviet Union plan to achieve with this strange hold on West Berlin?
Well, these two sections of Berlin were meant to be dealt with as completely separate entities, each with their own set of governments and regulations. However, this conflicts with the Soviet goal to bring the communist workers' revolution to other nations around the world. The only threat that the communists really face is a defensive move from a strong democratic power. That's where West Berlin comes in, because half of the German capital is controlled by very powerful democratic countries. The city of Berlin is more of a roadblock to Soviet expansion than a milestone.
So that means that if West Berlin were to fall to the east, then expansion would likely advance westward into more European countries.
That's absolutely right, and the Soviet Union is indeed very close to achieving that goal, with seemingly no way to obtain outside resources here in West Berlin. So what can you tell us about the ongoing airlift in Berlin? As some of you may know, the United States has taken a huge part in aiding West Berlin by dropping supplies to them in what has become known as the Berlin Airlift. Starting yesterday, American aircraft has been giving people here in West Berlin all of the supplies they need to continue living. The people here seem to be grateful to the US pilots who are doing this, and the pilots have no intention of stopping anytime soon.
Is there any reason as to why the United States became involved?
I believe that it's as simple as that if the governments controlling West Berlin didn't become involved, then the USSR would have won the city, something that would have drastically contradicted the American Truman Doctrine policy. Thanks, Fernando. We'll be right back. Then let's move on to the meteorologist Sunny Merriweather, filling in for Thunder Lightning. Then more from the blockade crisis in Berlin on the Channel 13 News. Nerd, 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 dun dun.
Welcome back to the 5 o'clock news at 7. Today we've been discussing the Berlin blockade and airlift in detail. But before we get into exactly what's been happening in West Berlin, let's talk with Sunny Merriweather about how the changes in the weather have affected the situation. Thank you, Cooper. Today in LA it is very humid and the temperatures will remain in the highs almost all of next week. If we take a look at the forecast for the upcoming week, Monday will be about the same with a high at 84. Tuesday is looking to be a bit cooler with the humidity lowering by almost 10%. Wednesday and Thursday are going to be hot with highs in the mid-80s. And don't expect it to cool down much on Friday.
Gotta love that summer weather, right, Sunny?
Of course, Matthew, but it isn't summer everywhere in the world. In Berlin today, the weather was beautiful, with temperatures in the low 80s and not a single cloud in the sky. But tomorrow, people in West Berlin are expecting drastic changes in temperature as a cold front is moving in. No rain is to be expected at this time of year. However, intense fog is a high probability. But I have been informed that the airlift will continue, rain or shine, until they can get supplies of their own, so there's nothing to worry about there.
Thanks, Sunny. Now back to Fernando in West Berlin, who I'm told has an eyewitness on scene. Fernando? Thanks, Matthew. I'm at the scene with a common West Berliner that speaks fluent English, something that is very hard to find here. Can you tell us your name?
Yes. My name is Helga. This is my baby Wilfreda.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you. Now, would you please tell our viewers what has been going on the past few days here?
Well, I think everything happened a few days ago when the power suddenly went out.
It might be hard to live without your favorite television programs, such as the Channel 13 News at 5 o'clock.
Yes, I suppose so. Anyway, it turns out that the same thing happened across all of West Berlin. Then my children and I went to be with my in-laws in the east, and all of the ways out of this side of the city were blocked. I had thought a war had started.
And what did you think about the airlift that began yesterday?
I was inside, and it came as a complete shock to me. I was reading one of Wilfreda's books to my 7 children when I heard the commotion outside. It frightened me because my husband was outside talking to a family friend, and I thought he could have been killed.
Very interesting. Is your husband around now to talk about his experience?
Yes, I will go fetch him. Jürgen! Jürgen!
While Helga finds her husband,
Jürgen!
Jurgen, let's go back to Cooper and Matthew in the studio.
Thanks, Fernando. We're going to take a break, and when we return, we will speak with West Berlin's Jürgen Huber. And also, we'll be discussing the reasons for the blockade and U.S. involvement. We'll be right back.
Nerd, 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 dun dun. Hello and welcome back to the 5 o'clock news at 7. Today's special is on the Berlin airlift and blockade. Just before the break, we were talking to Helga Hubert, a citizen affected by the crisis in West Berlin. She says her husband was outdoors during the start of the airlift. Sharing his experience, here is Jürgen Hubert, live on the scene. It was a really terrifying experience when they began dropping things. I saw children running into the street and picking up items that had fallen then. None of us were sure what these items were. At first I thought, like my wife had said, that we were being bombed and Germany had been attacked. My son Klaus brought me a candy bar then that he had picked up off of the ground. That's when we figured out it was not an air raid, it was air aid. Now, Jürgen and his family know that the aid has come from pilots in the U.S. under Truman's instruction, and they can live a little more peacefully, thanks to the Channel 13 News. I'm Fernando Fitzgerald, live in Berlin.
Thank you, Fernando. The most frequently asked question in both the United States and Berlin right now must be, why are the U.S. getting involved? Now, we'll take a look into why the U.S. is helping, interviewing a Soviet enthusiast, Svetlana Slutsky, and an American debate team leader, Richard Head. Here it is.
Well, Matthew, Soviet authorities are trying to spread communism, and we can't do that when democracy is in the way. The easiest way to move around democracy is to put up a blockade so it can't get through to West Berlin, and eventually we'll have both parts of Berlin by doing that. But of course, democracy found its way around our blockade and is taking over once again. What the United States is trying to do is stop the spread of communism to areas that don't want it. All due respect, Mr. Head, the Soviet Workers' Revolution has been making its way all across the world, and it has been very successful in the countries it has approached. But while communism has been successful in countries it intimidates into submission, democracy is nearly always favored by the people. When it comes to a governmental perspective, communism is much stronger than democracy. Thus, it is more able to change things to make communist life more productive and positive. In my opinion, this is much better for the desperate German population.
Dick, what's your argument?
But what has the Soviet Union done to make life for Berliners any more positive? The democratic West Berlin lifestyle has been significantly better than the East German life of poverty. And there's proof of that in the Berlin airlift. If America and its allies hadn't intervened, then the population would have suffered starvation and torture at the hands of the Soviet aggression. But na-na-na-na-boo-boo, communism's poo-poo.
Nerd, 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 dun dun. Could the wind please be a little bit more inconvenient? That would be super.